Okay. All right. Thanks, Tanya, and good evening and welcome everyone. Nice to see such a good crowd. I think this is the best lineup I've seen for a community conversation. My name is Brian Weiss. I'm chair of the Land Bank Commission. We've been having these community conversations for several years now, and online at least since COVID. So that would be 4 years now, I think, available online to all of the islanders. And a year ago, this commission engaged in a strategic planning process to assess our present conditions, our challenges, and our future directions. And one of our main takeaways from the surveys that we did going into the strategic plan, and one of our main goals of the strategic plan was we determined that we needed to do a better job of communicating with you, our constituents. To that end, we've begun distributing a quarterly newsletter by our email list. We've continued to mail our annual report to all post office boxes in the islands. And we've increased the number of community meeting announcements and articles on our activities that we've put in all of the local newspapers and online venues. So this community conversation is a continuation of our efforts to communicate with you, share information about the land bank's recent activities and accomplishments on our future plans and goals, and to hear your suggestions about what you'd like to see us doing, your wishes for the land bank in the future. So I also want to recognize that we have all been receiving a lot of mailers and media posts on the election, and particularly on Proposition 1, our ballot measure to renew the land bank's REIT funding. Most of those have not come from the land bank. We have sent out one informational folder, as we're allowed to do. There is also a group, and many of you know this already. We have a friends group called renewourlandbank.com, which has sent out several mailers and web posts supporting the land bank's renewal. So I just wanted to let everybody know that that is an independent group separate from the land bank, but we appreciate their support, and I just want to acknowledge that group. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to have our commissioners introduce themselves and let everybody know which island you represent. So, Anne-Marie, you want to start?
Sure. I'm Anne Marie Shanks, and I'm over in Deer Harbor on Orcas. And I joined the land bank, or was selected to join the land bank this year. And it's really just a delight to be involved with such a great organization that does so much for our county. It's just, I'm so proud of all the work we do and all the work that's been done over the past years. So thank you so much for letting me be a part of this.
I don't have to call on you.
Okay,
commissioners.
I'll go, Brian. I'm Mike Pickett. I've been on the Land Bank Commission for about 3 years, and it's primarily because I value and cherish our rural life here on San Juan, and believe that the way the commission was set up to ask new residences to contribute through the REIT to the preservation of our lands and actually help the folks who have already made that investment through their purchases of property in the last 30 years. So I think it's a great setup, and I'm really proud to be part of it. And I think the strategic planning session that we did really set us on the right track, kept us on the same goals and same objectives, and asked us to measure ourselves. So thank you.
Peggy?
I'm Peggy Bill, and I'm on Lopez. And so I rejoined the Land Bank Commission 2 years ago. I was a Land Bank Commissioner back in the 90s. And, as everybody is saying, I'm so proud of the Land Bank, and we have fabulous staff and a director who I think we all stand behind, and really appreciate all the good work that everybody does. We're so lucky.
Yeah.
Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Amy Trainer. I am on San Juan Island. I'm a at-large commissioner, I guess. I joined at the beginning of 2023, and like everybody else, I'm just really proud to contribute a little bit to such a great organization that has done really incredible things for the quality of life and preserving the ecology and agricultural heritage of the islands. And I'm looking forward to having a conversation with everybody this evening, and really appreciate your time. So thank you for making time this evening.
Okay. And we have 2 additional commissioners whom I'm not seeing on screen yet. They are Tim Clark from Lopez, who was going to be here, maybe come in later, and Marilyn O'Connor from San Juan Island. Peggy, I see your hand up.
So we have a little conflict on Lopez because at this time, we're also having the comp plan update discussion in the village. So I imagine that's where Tim is.
Okay. Let me also ask our staff here to introduce themselves. These are the folks who do the heavy lifting and the ones you're most likely to see any day in the field. So Amanda, you want to start it out?
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Weedo. I'm the Lopez Preserve Steward.
Tyler?
Hi there, I'm Tyler Goodman, and I am the field assistant on Orcas.
And Doug?
Hello, hello. I'm Doug McCutcheon, and I'm the preserve steward here on San Juan Island. And I just got a note back from Marilyn. She said, "Oh no, I'll join." So Marilyn will be on any second.
Okay, good. Thanks, Doug. And you have met Tanya Williamson, who is our volunteer and outreach coordinator, the person you're most likely to hear from most of the time, our main contact for events. And Tanya is the person who puts out all those newsletters and articles. And she will be moderating this discussion. And last but not least, our director, Lincoln Bormann, who will be giving us a brief presentation before we take questions and answers and have discussion. So Tanya, take it away.
And Aaron, don't forget Aaron.
Oh, Aaron, I'm sorry. It's very small on my screen through that owl.
And Margo.
And Margo
as well.
And Margo.
There.
My
Margo
apologies.
is our field assistant at or nursery assistant, I guess, and also backup with outreach. So thanks, Margo. She's new to the team in that. Are you passing it off to us now, Brian?
I am passing it off to you, Tanya. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll pass it to Lincoln, who's got a brief update and presentation. And I think Aaron's going to share his screen. It's on the owl.
Do you want to change the process?
Oh, right. Sorry. Thank goodness I have backup here. Just a quick, Marilyn, a quick housekeeping about questions. So after the presentation from Lincoln, we've got, we don't have anyone here in person, so that simplifies it somewhat. But for those of you, all of you that are online, the chat is open. So you are welcome to put questions into the chat. I will be monitoring those questions as well as Aaron Rock. He will also be monitoring to make sure that, I'm not missing anything. You also have the opportunity to raise your hand online if you'd like to speak. Some people prefer to speak live. And if you don't know where that is, at the bottom of your screen, there is an icon that says reactions. If you tap on that or click on that with your mouse, that will give you a raise hand icon, and that's how you can raise your hand, and it'll bring you to the top of our screen, which would be very helpful because I have a very small screen and there are 2 pages right now. I won't see everybody all the time. And the other piece to that is some people may have only one question, some people may have more than one. I'll do my best to put topics together as they come up, but also in order to give everyone the opportunity to speak or ask their questions, I'll rotate through the list that I have. And then if I get through all the folks, all the attendees, and there's then we can have repeat questions. Saying I'll come back to the same people, but just make sure everyone has at least their voice heard that wants it to be heard. And I think that covers everything. Thanks for being patient. It's always strange to talk to a computer screen. So I will pass it over now to Lincoln and his presentation.
Great, thank you, Tanya. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody, and we're going to give you, well, I'm going to give you an update on what we've been doing and also talk a little bit about the future. So here we go, next slide. Our accomplishments, I do like to lead off with. We have 49 conservation easements on 7 islands, and these are working farms or forests, shorelines, a whole variety of properties. We also have 39 preserves, and 32 of those are open to the public. Also important, a lot of figures get thrown out about ownership in the county, and I think it's important for us to be clear on the fact that the land bank preserves comprise 4.5%. That's 4.5% the county's land mass. I think some of the reason for the other figures that we hear, if we go on to the next slide, come from the assessor's data, which has a variety of charts and figures in it. But here it is, really broken down. And I think the main point here that's important for people to understand is that the county is actually 83% privately owned. Some of the confusion comes from the different designations, tax designations that properties are in, like designated forest land or current use for agriculture, open space, and there is exempt acreage, senior exemptions, disabled exemptions, etc. But those properties are still all privately owned. The public ownership is 17%. You can see the land bank in there. And then the other public conservation agencies, the national parks, state parks, Bureau of Land Management, etc. That the conservation ownership actually is about 16.5%. The other 0.5% of public ownership is ports or schools, those kinds of things. So this is the main takeaway here, though, is that the county is 83% privately owned. Next slide. We're very conscious about looking at this question of our impact on taxes. And I think the first important thing to remember is that is the context that the total taxable value in the county is over $14 billion. The value of our properties, and this is something that may be difficult for people to not understand, but let me just lay it out for you. The taxable value that we've determined of our properties is $60 million. And remember, a lot of that is because over 75% of what we've purchased of our 5,000 acres has been in some of these low tax categories. For example, Turtleback, which is our largest preserve by far at 1,600 acres, they were paying under $1,000 a year in taxes. So obviously not a big impact there. So of the $60 million in taxable value, that really is less than 0.5% of the county's total. If we did the exercise of putting the properties back on the tax rolls and holding the tax the same, the savings for a $750,000 property would be about $15 a year. So we do this every year, calculating the taxable value of our properties and running through this calculation again and again. Next slide. This does give rise to the question, because I think there have been some assertions about whether conservation or public property ownership actually increases taxes. What this chart shows, or graph shows, is all of the counties in Washington state. On the bottom axis is the percentage of land in private ownership, and on the vertical axis is the property tax rate. And what you're seeing there is actually the more land there is in private ownership, the higher the tax rate. And that line is a regression line. So we did an analysis, and that is a statistically valid result. We're something of an outlier here in that we've got 83% private ownership. However, we have the lowest tax rate in the state. So you can see our dot is that very lower one to the right. Next slide. Okay, I wanted to talk a bit about what we've been doing this year. We've put a lot of emphasis on getting properties open to the public, and we now have 32 properties open to the public, which is more than 80% of our 82% of our holdings. Next slide. Katy Mountain Preserve is one we got open this year. It's taken a long time, and it wasn't until we were able to acquire property on a county road that enabled us to really provide public access. But we did that, and this year we were finally able to get the trailhead in. This is a 20-year project with all the acquisitions that have happened. One of the key things here, in addition to the incredible ecological value of this property, the recreational opportunity here is really important. This trail connects to Roach Harbor Highlands, which allows public access by permission, and also over to English Camp, part of the National Historical Park. You can actually start on this trail at Three Corner Lake Road and walk all the way to Roach Harbor on a trail. So really a great opportunity. Next slide. This is just a shot from the opening we had in June. Good turnout, lots of happy people. It's a beautiful, beautiful trail going through forests and a variety of habitats. Really encourage you to get out and take a look at it. Even at this time of year, it's a pretty magical place. Next slide. Also this year, Beaverton Marsh Preserve, an opening from the Lindy Park, Lindy Community Park, was something that we were really excited to do. We've had Beaverton open for a couple of years from the west, from Halverson Road. You can see that P there is a parking area at the end of Halverson Road. But we really wanted to get this trail open because it connects directly to town. And so you could go to Lindy Park, use that as a trailhead. We have this half-mile loop trail. What we do not have yet is the connector between these two, which will require a boardwalk going across that neck of the marsh. It's going to be a very challenging project, very expensive. The marsh is a pretty mystical place. We've drilled down 80 feet and still not found hard bottom, even in that little neck area. So we've got some engineering challenges to make that happen, but we hope to do that in the coming years. Next slide. This is just a shot from the opening. So this really gives people an opportunity for a new experience. There's an existing concrete trail that goes around Lindy Park, and our packed gravel trail comes off of that, really takes you from kind of an urban setting into a much more natural area. It's highly accessible. Lots of people have been out there with all manner of transport to do it. Recommend that you get out and take a look at it. It's a great spot. Next slide. Also, I just wanted to mention, because I have heard questions about the acquisition of Beaverton Marsh and what we paid. Now, this is, again, another project that's taken about 20 years to complete, but this is the picture of what was bought and how much we paid for it, what the appraised value was when we purchased it, but also what we were able to do in terms of lining up other partners to bring money to the table to offset the REIT funds that we would use to make this purchase. So the final numbers here are, there was an appraised value of 4.6 million of all of these properties thrown together. 4.1 was the purchase price, with 2 million coming from the land bank and 2.5 million coming from partner funds. So really an incredible project. Took a long time to pull it together, but it's well worth it. Next slide. And this brings me to talking about our acquisitions over time in a complete picture. So these are all of our acquisitions from the beginning of the program. What you can see is at the top is properties that were purchased outright. You see the appraised value of those purchases, 85 million, with 82 million what was actually paid, and then the split. So 48 million coming from the land bank and 54 from partners, as we were able to really go out and find grants and partner with other organizations to bring in additional resources to make these things possible. On the bottom is conservation easements. So there, we don't quite know the appraised value of all of those purchases because there were a number of donations, and people aren't obligated to tell us the value that they had their easement donation appraised at. So we have an estimate. We know we spent 56, sorry, on easements. We spent 7.8 million. And we had partners bringing 2.6 million to the table. So all told, 56 million in land bank expenditures with 62 million coming from partners. Next slide. Okay, back to openings and what we've been up to this year. The North Shore Preserve on Orcas Island was a key one. Orcas is really very challenged in terms of access to the shoreline. There's a lot of rocky shoreline, a lot of privately owned shoreline. So it's very hard to come by. And when this property became available in 2021, it was really one of the very few opportunities out there. And we knew it was critical for us to move forward with it, despite the fact that it's not a pristine property. It is an old inn property, and it came with a lot of things on it. Next slide. This is just a shot of the infrastructure. All of it was dilapidated. Really, we had a big challenge to remove it. So these smaller structures were removed. Any materials we could get out that were useful actually went to the exchange on Orcas. That larger structure, next slide, we ended up calling the fire department and having them do a practice burn. This was a really great teaching opportunity for them, and enabled us to really get rid of a lot of the material here. Next slide. Doesn't all go away. You can see in the upper right, that's what you're left with after a fire. So we had to collect all of that concrete and cart that off as well. The main structure was built on a wetland area, so that after removal really gave us the opportunity to get back in and regrade some of that and recreate wetlands. So we can go on to the next one. That's how it looked beforehand, and one more. This is how it looks today. So with all the structures gone, we did keep that big red structure. That's the one that was in really great shape. It's a great utility structure for us. You can see the parking area there also. So this has been open since September 28th, Public Lands Day. Okay, next slide. One more on this one, we likely will not get open in 2024. It's been a pretty complicated one, but we have been working down on the Watmau Bay area on the southeastern part of Lopez for quite a long time. One of the earliest acquisitions we had was a donation of a portion of that beach, which you see in the background of that lower right-hand slide. Then we purchased another property. We were given a donation of a property, and this one became available also in 2021. And this is the last unprotected property on the bay. It's a spectacular piece with some scalloped small beaches and also really in an incredible place from a natural habitat standpoint. You can see the bull kelp in front of it there on the lower right, and also the eelgrass beds throughout Watmau Bay. It's rich too in cultural history, a long history of indigenous use, thousands of years, and it has the oldest structure on Lopez, the Sampson Chadwick House is also on this property. So it's taking us quite a bit to figure out exactly how to manage the property. We will have it open to public access next year, certainly, but we've got a lot of questions to be answered too. So that's where we are with that. Let's move on. Okay, it's important for everyone to know that getting properties open and just having public access is just one piece of what we do when we're managing properties. And increasingly, we've been working at the landscape scale, really trying to deal with some of the issues that we have, and a lot of other landowners have these issues too, where we've got forests that are not healthy. And you can see the stand density in that lower picture there of what you're working with. A lot of unhealthy small diameter trees, and they really need to be thinned. You can see the top is the result of that, where we've got some of the larger debris piled to function as kind of coarse woody debris on the forest floor. Also, we take a lot of the other material and we do conservation burns to create biochar. So leaving behind a forest that functions much better and also will be much more resistant to the potential for wildfire. So next slide. Also, once we are finished and we have some of these burn piles, this is where our Salish Seeds nursery comes in. And last year, we grew 4,700 plants and plugs and also produced 30 pounds of seed. 30 pounds is a lot of seed. It doesn't seem like it, but it's a phenomenal seed. And so a lot of that went back out to try and enhance the diversity of plants in these sites. Also, last year was a massed year for Gary Oaks, and we had a lot of volunteers go out and collect 7,000 Gary Oak acorns, and all of those were planted across the preserves in appropriate Gary Oak areas as well. Next slide. All this has meant that things have changed over time in our spending. So at the beginning of the program, where we did not have much in the way of stewardship costs, a lot of our funding would go to acquisition. And now you can see a lot more is going to stewardship. And that's not necessarily because we've got more property. It's because we're choosing to do more landscape scale management of that property, and also choosing to make sure that people have an opportunity to get out onto the properties and actually see them. let's move on. Okay, so we've talked about recreation, we've talked about conservation management, and now let's talk about, and we have a strong relationship with agriculture in a number of ways. First of all, we've got 700 acres that we own outright that is in ag resource designation. 500 of that is leased to farmers, and we'll come back to that in a minute. It's important to remember too that just because something is in ag resource designation doesn't mean it's farmable. In the background there is Zylstra Lake. So you've got 50 acres of lake that's in ag resource designation, but obviously that cannot be farmed. On conservation easements, so we've got 49 easements on 7 islands. And altogether, between the property, the leases that we have and the easements that we have, we're working with 29 different farms. Next slide. So some of the detail on the leases. We're trying our best to really diversify what we've got. Certainly, we've got a lot of property that is in pasture land, and grazed for livestock and growing hay, but we have a variety of other things happening too. And I'll come back to some of those, but we're actively working, particularly as we move forward with new leases, to try and diversify the types of agriculture that are happening on those leased properties. So our lessees, the Shepherd family, that's forthcoming. Rob Waldron, Eric and Amy Lum. The Grange is also forthcoming, and also Adam Green and Sarah Pope. And we have more than that, but these are the ones that are most prominent. So next slide. Lum Farm, a fantastic place. This is Kaufelt Farm Preserve. So the Lums are leasing it and running it. It's a 180-acre farm on Orcas, and it does have a very diverse set of things they do. Last Friday, we actually had Amy Lum come to the Land Bank Commission meeting and give an update on their activities. That was reported. I would encourage people, in fact, we may be able to drop the link in the chat. I'm not sure about that, but it'd be it's a great opportunity for people to go take a look at her presentation and see what they're actually doing out there. Next slide. Okay, another one that's coming up, the Overmarsh Farm Commons project with the Grange. This is on Beaverton Marsh Preserve. This is the Roche Harbor Road side of the property. So all the way in that kind of northern area, which has a long history of agricultural use. Next slide. The Grange has a really ambitious project, and we're really looking forward to seeing how this takes shape. But they're going to be leasing 35 acres and doing a whole variety of things with it, from community garden patches to allotments of small allotments to commercial plots, collaborative farms. And they're open to all kinds of other arrangements as well. So this will be something for everybody to keep an eye on. There are a lot of folks involved in this from the Grange, and there will be a lot more community members involved in it as well going forward. Next slide. One of the great things about it too is that since the Grange has a permanent booth at the farmers market, whatever's grown here that people want to sell can be sold through that booth. So we look forward to seeing a whole variety of things coming from the operations on that. Next slide. Just a shot of Fraser Homestead Preserve. This is in the southern portion of San Juan Island. This is going to be leased to the shepherds, and they'll be grazing it. We really are looking forward, though, to their excellent track record in managing pasture for soil productivity and health. I think keeping an eye on this one too will be great for anybody passing by or walking by on the trail that's on the western portion of this property. Next slide. Okay, lastly, Zylstra Lake, I just wanted to throw this up there. It is under lease for hay production. So 70 acres is leased to cut hay. I wanted to point out too, though, that there are a lot of other things out there on this property. So there are wetlands and lakes, riparian areas. There are places with poor agricultural soils. They're really not suited to agriculture. And then there's some left over. We've got a lot of work to do to figure out exactly, what we're going to do moving forward. We know we're interested in conserving the natural resources on this site. We're also well aware of the high value of this lake as an agricultural reservoir. So we're looking forward to figuring out how to fit all these pieces together going forward. Next slide. Okay, 49 conservation easements. These are just some of them. It's a list of who they are, what's being grown on them. So a variety of things, certainly a lot of livestock grazing. We also have a cidery on one, and we've got people growing grain and vegetables on others. Really a pretty intense variety of operations out there. So just a couple of shots of two of those properties. Next slide. And this is Warm Valley Farm on Orcas, it's along Orcas Road. This is our oldest conservation easement. And this is the second owner of that property and still going strong. Really great to see. Next slide. Just some of the products that they're growing out there, really an amazing operation. Next one. This is Heritage Farm on San Juan. And it's important to remember that what a conservation easement does is basically try and keep the property so that agriculture can occur on the property. It doesn't ensure that agriculture is going to happen, but it does prevent the property from being overly developed or subdivided. This is a shot from the previous Heritage Farm operations. There's a new owner now. We're looking forward to seeing what they might have in mind, but there's a great opportunity there to really reestablish an important farm on San Juan. Next slide. This is Double R Bar Ranch on Lopez, 130-acre conservation easement. And they're grazing sheep, doing a variety of things. Just yet another property out there that we're working with the owners. This one was pretty interesting. It was on the land bank's list originally when it first was authorized in 1990. It took us a second generation to really be able to work with the landowner, Rex Ritchie, to do a conservation easement. But it is in place now. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk a bit about our conservation objectives going forward. And this is really a question about when is enough enough. It's something we think a lot about, honestly. So what are we trying to do? What are we thinking about in terms of the needs out there that have not been met? Next slide. Okay, so how should we focus our efforts? And you can just click through these, Aaron. All the way, that's it. No, one back. Okay, so what we're looking at as important is to connect natural areas together to create larger natural areas that function better. We're looking at water and protection of water resources, plants and animals, obviously, biodiversity, working lands are really important, and then places for people as well. So those are the kind of guiding principles that we're focused on. Next slide. One of the things, we use a lot of different tools and analyses to come up with objectives and priorities. And one of those comes from the Nature Conservancy, which did a big analysis looking at resilience. What this means is we know the climate is changing. We're getting hotter, drier summers, more droughts, potential for fire out there. And so where do we have the best opportunities to retain what we've got across the landscape? That tends to be areas with a lot of topographic diversity, a lot of change in aspects of south facing to north facing. And when you look at the islands, this is where the centers of resilience lie. So some of these are protected. You can see Moran State Park kind of in the middle there, and then working our way down into San Juan, you can see we've protected some of those areas in that centerpiece, but still a lot to go there. And also on Orcas, a lot of areas you can see turtleback there, but a lot of other places that are not protected. And also areas in Lopez, even though that's in green, those are significant. So this is one tool that we use to try and figure out what we should prioritize. Next slide. Another thing, this is something that came up relatively recently. It's kind of interesting because we don't have a lot in the way of rivers or flowing creeks that go year round. We do have a lot of ephemeral streams. And this paper just shows how important those ephemeral or intermittent streams really are, because they can contribute a lot to problems if they're not managed correctly. So in this paper, they're saying 60% of the total discharge comes from these kinds of streams. Fortunately, we have done a fair amount. So next slide, you can see that we have protected all or part of 45 ephemeral streams in the county, in addition to parts of False Bay and Cascade Creeks. One of the other important things to remember about this type of stream is it's one of the things that in a recent Supreme Court decision, which was exempted from Clean Water Act protection. So we're all you've got in terms of protecting these kinds of places in the county. Next slide. So where are we going? And here again, the context is really important. So this is what I call the development matrix. So everything that's colored there is already developed, or it's in smaller parcels, or you've got vacant parcels that are surrounded by lots that have houses. In other words, these are not good conservation priority areas. So 65% of the total of the largest 3 islands is in this development matrix, including, as you can tell, a lot of the shoreline areas. Next slide. So that leaves us with what our opportunities are. In the green, you can see what's been protected. So you can see Turtleback and Moran, and you can see the Trout Lake Reservoir area on San Juan, et cetera. What we're looking at in terms of priorities is really what's in the white. So you can tell where we're focused on, in San Juan in particular, that northern area, trying to connect the two existing larger conservation areas. A lot of that is Roche Harborland property, but a clear priority for us for sure. Areas west of Turtleback, also areas south of Moran. And when you look down at Lopez, it's a combination of things. So in that southeastern area, still a lot of good natural habitat down there. But also we've got the Central Valley, which is a predominantly agricultural area. And what we'd be looking to do there is preserve that agricultural heritage. Okay, next one. And this is the last one. So I rephrased the question of how much is enough to have you saved enough for us. And what are these things that you're looking at? Well, we've got pileated woodpeckers, which everyone knows, everyone's seen around the islands. Well, they have real habitat requirements, very specific requirements, with large home ranges of about 200 acres for breeding pair. They need larger trees to nest in, so older forests are really important. They also need a lot of carpenter ants, which is the vast majority of their diet. On the lower right, you've got a great horned owl, also the same thing, large home range requirements and needing older trees. In the middle, you can see bluebirds. The Preservation Trust had a bluebird reintroduction project that's been going on. They need a different kind of habitat, more open field type habitat. So that's important. Bottom center, the red-breasted sapsucker, really more like the woodpecker habitat that's necessary. This is a bird, though, that is declining in the islands, and one that we definitely keep a close eye on. And to the left, a Pacific salamander, which just gives you a sense of the importance of wetland areas to protect those kinds of species. And then in the upper right, we've got salmon. Why do we have salmon on this list? Well, what we do that's really important in terms of overall salmon numbers involves protecting places where juvenile salmon go. So we've got a lot of salmon that come out of the large river systems, and then they spend time around the islands trying to get bigger so that they can go out to sea and reproduce. While they're here, our nearshore environment is really important, our eelgrass beds, kelp beds, but there's also a very strong relationship between the land and the sea. And 30% of what these fish are eating when they're here is terrestrial or land-based insects or arthropods. So maintaining the health of those systems of our forests and wetlands is critical to the survival of the salmon as well. And that's what I've got for you.
All right, Aaron and I are going to switch spots so I can monitor the chat. And we'll go with that. Thanks, Lincoln. Have a talk for all the books. And the really cute dog that's in this office that no one can see. Let's see. So now I'm just a voice in the so again, as a reminder, if anybody wants to raise their hand, the Amy Trainer, our commissioner, has her hand up. Amy, why don't you go for it while I.
Oh no, I was just applauding Lincoln's great job. That's such a great summary. Thank you, Lincoln. I've seen it before, but it's always helpful to see it again. Thank you.
It's very similar to a raised hand, so it's a good practice for me. Okay, choose screen and grab in the chat. Oh, yours is different than mine. So I don't see any questions yet. Sorry, I have to bug. Anyone? I really don't want to say the Bueller thing, so I won't. Okay.
I have one.
Please go.
I was very interested in the resilience maps that you showed. Could you talk a little more about them? And before you continue, I want to say that was such a great presentation. And I really liked how you covered all these really important subject areas. And even being someone who knows a lot of that, I was impressed. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. There's certainly a lot going on, and there's a lot more where that came from. It could go on for another couple hours, but I'm sparing you. So to talk about resilience maps, yeah, that's something that we've been paying a lot of attention to, because the critical thing here is really trying to preserve the best of what we've got left. And that's what shows up on those maps. It's the diversity in topography. It's also, interestingly, when you think about precipitation, the highest amounts of precipitation we get are on the higher elevation areas of those islands. So we're really talking about trying to protect the headwaters of some of these streams or creeks in conserving those areas. But one of the things when you think about that too, in terms of where species are on the landscape and what you're trying to accomplish. If you have species now that are on a south-facing slope and the climate shifts and gets hotter and drier, you want to have the opportunity for migration. So you might find species in the future that now are on south-facing slopes actually over on north-facing slopes, but they have to have, there has to be the opportunity for that migration or movement to happen over time.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't know if I could jump in on that too, real quick. The source data on that was from the Nature Conservancy, and it was kind of based in this concept of what are the underlying characteristics that give rise to life, to biodiversity. And so it's a very kind of high level look at kind of what are those key elements and how do they all work together, that doesn't as much look at the existing conditions. Existing things like endangered species really don't rank in that. This is much more kind of looking at what is the stage, what gives rise to these, and how do you protect those landscapes in a large scale with a lot of integrity for and kind of unknown conditions in the future.
So can you send me the link to that?
Sure.
And I just also want to say that we've been up here on Katy Mountain for a little over 20 years and have definitely seen, we're seeing far fewer species, far fewer pileatids, really so many. And this year in particular has been concerning. Definitely seems like fewer insects around. And I know these things aren't linear. We could have an explosion next year, but it is still concerning. We need to keep aware of these trends and and plan for them. Plan to keep these species. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy, thanks for your patience.
Oh, no problem at all. And a great presentation. Learn something new every time I see these slides. So thank you,
You're
Lincoln.
good now.
Yeah, and so my question is, with our different county and state organizations and even federal, Lincoln, this is for you to really outline for this group how the land bank has helped preserve properties that may become part of the county park system, or even as an example, Audland South, or into looking at the acquisition, the North Spencer Spit, how that may, it's now in land bank ownership, but that may be transferred to state park, and just all the ways that the land bank focuses on a much wider goal that may not end up with those properties under the land bank, but certainly as a point of initiation. And so if you wanted to speak to that, including how the land bank worked on the Watmow addition. So that, I don't know if that's more than one question, but have at it.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. I think the first thing is that there is a terrestrial managers group, which is all the conservation land organizations in the county, and we meet regularly, monthly. We have an annual meeting. We're always looking for ways to provide synergy so that we can help each other, not just in trying to find areas to conserve, but also to share resources and share knowledge about how we should be managing properties. That's been going on for quite a long time now, since 2011, and really continues to function quite well. But yes, we definitely have been involved in a number of transactions that are not something that we end up with. In fact, those are some of my favorite transactions. I'm happy to help if a national park is going to purchase a property and we can somehow facilitate that. That's fantastic. Then we don't actually have to manage it. But there are a number of things along those lines, working with state parks or national parks or the BLM. And I would say the terrestrial managers group, the impetus for that really started around the movement towards trying to create the national monument. So that's what brought all of these groups together, and that was obviously a successful effort. There have been a lot of other things as well.
Great. Well, thank you. And often I've seen where the land bank puts the ultimate goal in in the forefront, where the land bank is not just trying to hold on to those pieces, but looking at where they best go in the future. And as far, I guess, in how the land bank may have more immediate funds, an easier way to make decisions quickly, whereas an agency like the National Monument or the state parks may take them longer. And so would you say that land bank is kind of the bridge or the way to hold on to those pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. We try and play that role. And also the Preservation Trust can play an important role there, being a nonprofit. But some of the other government agencies do have very, very long process involved in acquiring properties. And if we can help, we would.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Raise your hand or put into the chat a question. You raise your hand, you come to the front, get to see you. Did Lincoln's, I can't imagine his presentation did everything. Tracy, did you raise your hand again? Or is that a leftover? You're muted if you are.
I do have one more question, but I really don't want to go into a second question if there are any others, but I can't get enough of the positive things that the land bank that we're able to do because our county has a land bank. And it's still kind of hard to understand why we can, as a county, add on the affordable housing 0.5%, but any other county can't do that because they don't have a land bank. So it's hard for my brain to understand. I mean, yes, we can sit here and pat ourselves on the back, but if you can continue to tell me why that's possible for us and not for others.
Well, the two pieces of legislation, the enabling legislation for the for the conservation REIT, which is what we use, is connected to the affordable housing REIT also. So in order to be eligible to collect that 0.5% for affordable housing, you have to have a fully funded conservation REIT. That was set with a time limit of 2003. So no other counties are eligible for that affordable housing REIT. I'm sure we'll see activity in the legislature, people trying to make use of a REIT like that. It's certainly an incredibly useful tool. I think for us, it's just been really important because it enabled us to conserve areas and also provide resources to the affordable housing groups. And actually, one of the interesting things I found is that while we've worked really hard to leverage resources, the affordable housing groups have had incredible success with that. Really, where we're at 1-to-1, they're at 1-to-3, almost 1-to-4 in terms of the resources they can bring to the table because they have that REIT to work with. That's the important thing. If you have that initial funding, it enables you to get additional funding. There's often a match.
Wow, I did not know that. So thank you.
All right. Anyone else out there that has a question, something that wasn't covered? Or need extra clarification? Our next meeting will be on Lopez. I'll throw that one out there for any Lopesians that are on.
I had a
next monthly
question in the
meeting.
chat. Sorry.
Sorry, it did not alert me. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, I guess I must have not set it up correctly because I'm not seeing it on my other. So, pull it up for us. Oh, okay. So the question is, well, you can go ahead and ask it, Amanda, since your question, rather, you want me to read it or?
Yeah, I just have some background noise, but I'll ask it. It won't take long. Isn't the vision of the land bank to manage its properties into the future? I was confused about the question asking where they will go.
I think that question is, in some cases, we are purchasing property with the idea that we're not necessarily going to hold on to it. And I'll give you an example of that that's currently in play. The Fraser Homestead property, which we are going to keep most of, and we are going to have a lease, that agricultural lease on that portion of the property. The southern two lots of that are adjacent to the San Juan Island National Historical Park, the American Camp Unit. And actually, we believe that was where the Lyman Cutler cabin was. So the Park Service has been very interested in that property, and they're looking at purchasing it, which would be great. We don't need to own it or manage it. It's an important thing for them to have. So we're happy to work with them.
Okay, so it's not like you're thinking that they need to go be sold to the county for affordable housing, or I mean, the goal is to have them go to a conservation type organization.
Well, in some cases, the land bank purchases property, and when they do so, they have a provision for possible resale. But that's only if the conservation values associated with the property can be satisfied in private ownership. So, for example, if we've got a property with, let's just to make it as simple as possible, there's an important view shed from a road, and the property protects that view shed, but you have the potential to put a house site somewhere out of that view. You could see purchasing it with the provision for resale to a private owner while you're still protecting that resource. It's a simplistic example, but
well, Argyle Lots is a good example of that, really, because it was purchased to protect the historic nature of the town and possibly provide green space that they don't have a lot of, and then was sold when the county or the town agreed to those provisions.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a great example. The land bank never intended to retain those lots. They were always intended to be developed, but retain the historic character of the neighborhood. So we've got a great solution there in that the council purchased the property and is now leasing it to the San Juan Community Home Trust. They're going to build an affordable housing development. There is a covenant that the town holds that requires what's built there fit with the neighborhood. And so hopefully this will all work out really well, and we'll see 40 units of affordable housing.
Great, thanks for clarifying.
Now I do have a question in the chat. We got it sorted. Thanks for bearing with me with the computer. So the question is on the resilience topic. Can you share a little bit more about the freshwater conservation benefits of land bank properties, and from an avoided development perspective, a forest wetland cover maintenance perspective, or other?
Well, that's a very complicated question.
I can read it again or break it down.
So the freshwater resources in terms of resilience are really very critical. I think that the more we can do to retain some of those natural features, certainly the wetland features, and some of those ephemeral stream features, the better off we're going to be, and the more biodiversity we're going to have. Because one of the things you really need to have a good balanced system is not just one kind of thing, not just a forest, but also if there's a wetland area or a stream corridor that runs through that forest, that's going to be critical to retain, because you're going to see different organisms living in different places, but they're not necessarily independent of each other. They can be dependent. So that's my shot at answering part of the question. I think there was a second part.
Okay, so the second part, from an avoided development perspective, a forest wetland cover maintenance perspective, I think that goes, I think maybe that.
Yeah, well, it goes towards our conservation objectives. So we're not, we are not the growth management entity of the county. That's not really our function. What we're trying to do is protect the most important places. And to that end, if you have an area which is now an intact, large natural area, you don't want to see development in the middle of it. That's going to create some real problems. So if there's a way to protect that area in its entirety, even if it means shifting the development away from that to someplace else, that's something that is really, really desirable along all kinds of lines. It's, for one thing, really important for people to remember that when we think about this question of fire, we're not like a lot of the mainland. Our fire risk is not as high, but it's going to get there. Right now, though, when there are fires, what you see is they're not coming from natural areas much at all. Well over 95%, some 98%, not sure what the exact percentage is. It comes from private properties where people have burn piles and they're doing a whole variety of things. They're cutting wood, they're sparking, they're mowing. That's what creates a lot of the fires that we have. So if we can have larger intact natural areas, it's really going to help us address that issue going forward.
All right. Brian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Tanya. This is but a comment. I just wanted to acknowledge our staff. Coming from a conservation organization with a very large staff, and my friends have heard me say this before, I am continually impressed by the land bank's staff in the field and in the office. We have a staff of 13, I think 9 of them, if I'm counting right, in the field to serve all of the islands and all of our 39 preserves. And I frankly don't know how they do it. Not only do they work extremely hard and diligently, but I constantly rely on them as a source of knowledge. They're really very up to speed and knowledgeable in terms of ecology and stewardship practices. So I just wanted to do a shout out to the staff because they are very competent, and I think we're a very slim and efficient organization. They're the faces of the land bank in the field, so say hi to them next time. Also, we rely a lot on volunteers, and a lot of you in the audience tonight probably are volunteers. Tanya organizes all of those things, and that's one of the ways that we do our work and do it so well. So thank you to staff and volunteers.
Thank you. I'm just adding into the chat, if you send your questions directly to Aaron, then I'll actually see them. We'll switcheroo there on the screen. Anyone else? So we do have a monthly commission meeting next month on Lopez. That third Friday will be at the Family Resource Center. A little shout out for that for everyone that's on right now. And of course, if you're on our email list, you'll get a reminder month. It is 7:14, so we still have time. There's more questions or clarification. Send a question to comment in the chat to Aaron, who's on in the chat screen, or raise your hand, it'll pop you to the top.
Hey, this is Steve Albee. I can't get my hand up here for some reason. So, and it's probably planned that way. So, can I have a moment to make a comment?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, good. I wanted to, I very much appreciate what Brian said, and I couldn't more strongly agree with that. And I have worked as a volunteer for many years, not so much lately with the land bank, on trails especially, and a few other projects, and I've always been impressed with every element of their work. And I come from a background in Alaska, very controversial situations with new national parks and running field crews and people out in the woods and things. And so I have some basis for my feelings, and they're very positive. The second thing I wanted to say is that this campaign, this renewal campaign, has been a bit of a slog for everybody, and it has been contentious, as would be expected, more so than necessary in my mind, because there's a lot of information available that people just don't avail themselves to. But I really wanted to say that having perused most of the newspapers and outlets around here, made comments myself, written articles in support of the whole idea of the two REITs and the land bank, I would just like to say that I've been extremely impressed from Lincoln on down to every staff member, commission member who has responded to criticism, to questions, and to sometimes very hard circumstances. And I have never seen anyone lose their temper at all, get frustrated at all, or do anything except give excellent information, factual-based information about the situation. And that is not easy to do. And I think in part, the reason we're going to have such great success in this renewal is because of the quality of the staff and the staff commission responses to the public. So I wanted to thank you very much for that. It makes it very easy to be a strong land bank supporter.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah. Or I don't know if that's it. That's a clapping. Man, they changed those emojis. It's hard for a person with these new glasses. Any other questions or comments? Let's see that. I don't have any in the chat. And then, well, why don't you check there, Aaron and Laura, because two. That's me. Oh, okay. So if you could please provide a brief overview of the land bank's effort to prevent or mitigate the effects of climate change. Please, Lincoln.
Yeah, and we talked about that a bit. So in terms of preventing or mitigating climate change, our goal really is to try and have as healthy systems as we possibly can. So when we're out there thinning forests, for example, it's not just about making sure that there's less chance of a fire out there, but once the forest is thinned, those trees are going to grow much more vigorously, and they're going to absorb a lot more carbon as they grow. So there's a strong connection there. And Doug looks like he has his hand up. Are you wanting to answer this question, or do you have another? No, and now you're muted.
I had a different statement I was going to make, but
Okay, all right.
I could try to jump in if you like. So
Well, I'll just stumble on a little bit then. So that's really both mitigating and trying to reduce the potential impact of climate change. And the other thing too, when we're doing that, the reason we're doing biochar or creating charcoal with those conservation burns is because that's actively locking carbon up for a long period of time. So we're able to keep carbon out of the atmosphere by taking that step. Across the board, though, I think the goal is really to have highest functioning systems that we can, whether that's in a forest, whether that's in a wetland area, whether it's in an agricultural area, healthy systems, agricultural areas with good soil and practices that enable strong root growth that's going to sequester a lot of carbon in the soil, help deal with potential drought issues and a whole variety of other things. So it kind of goes across the board. And I'll stop there.
You want to go, Doug? Either a new statement or add on?
yeah, it was actually just something really simple. I just wanted to kind of maybe ladder off of what you had mentioned earlier about a commission meeting coming up. And I've been hearing some narrative just in the community about the need for there to be a community dialogue about the land bank and how we go about what we do and all of that. And so for all of you here tonight, this is it. These are these conversations. So, if you've got questions, please jump in here. But the other thing I wanted to pass on about that is that conversation happens every month of every year at the Land Bank Commission meetings. And we would love to have that participation from the community. This is a community organization. The properties that we acquire are vetted through a community process. Many of them are brought to the land bank by community members. So it's a key component of what we do is that involvement from the public. So if you hear people saying that we need to have that conversation, get them here, get them to the table. We'd love to hear from them. So thanks.
I would add to that too, though, that we're always available. We've got people out on the land and always interacting with folks. If you've got questions, we're happy to answer them. People stop in the office all the time. They want to talk to me about something. I'm there. I'm happy to talk to you. Email me, call me, whatever, or other staff or commissioners too. They're the liaison to the rest of the community. So you should feel absolutely free to talk to them about anything. And we'll do our best to answer your questions.
And I will add that if stopping in at the office or finding people on properties are hard, the emails are all on the website for staff and commissioners, or I'm a direct line too. So you all probably have gotten an email from me or will after this, after the Zoom for the registration. So yeah, please don't be shy.
And our properties have management plans, and management plans get updated. And those are all important things for the public to participate in. So, if you're interested in a particular preserve, pay attention to when the management plan's coming up, because there might be something about birds or something you are really, really interested in. And we'd like to hear from you.
And we do actually, there is a management plan out right now for public comment, which is for the North Beach Preserve on Orcas Island. North Shore. Late, sorry. Coffee's wearing off. And that is, you can find that on our website, or I can mail you a hard copy, an email. Amanda, I think that's your hand I see.
Yeah, I just want to point out that public input matters and can really change things. And I'm just remembering back one of the first projects when I was a commissioner was Schaefer Pond on Orcas Island. And the land bank had wanted to have public access to that pond. with a trail around part of it. And the community did not want people there. And it was a pretty powerful presentation by the community, and the land bank changed its direction. So it does matter to participate and say what you think and what you need.
Thank you. There's still some time if anyone does have another comment or question.
Or after the meeting, please feel free to contact us.
Why don't I'll type my email in there in case anyone doesn't have it. Hopefully. Apparently I only sent it to one person. Sorry. Aaron's watching the screen while I do this. There you go. So hopefully everyone just got that. That's my email. If a question pops up afterwards, I can certainly pass it on. Commissioner, staff, both, and get an answer back to you. All right, well, I guess if there's no more hands or chat, thank you all for spending the evening with us. I know it's late and appreciate everyone after their day at work coming in. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.